Well, hey everyone, welcome to Tuesday Tea. So glad that you could join us today. I have been patiently waiting for today's tea because I'm joined once again by one of my favorite people in the world, Heather Reid with Planner Protect. I approached Heather a few months ago about doing this tea, and I'm so glad she agreed to do this. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the Tuesday Tea.
Thank you so much. I thrilled to be, well, first of all, just thrilled to spend any time with you. And it has to be virtual, unfortunately, but I'll take it whenever and in whatever shape I can get it. But really actually excited about what we're going to chat about today, too. It's kind of a topic that I struggle with. So looking forward to talking it out.
Well, and do you remember the preface to this? Do you remember why I reached out to you about this particular topic?
I remember some of it. So fill me in, but I know that you and I had a discussion. I had just taken a little workshop on imposter syndrome because I truly do feel like I struggle with it. And we were talking about one of the methods or solutions that this particular moderator had suggested we use. And I had shown you the picture of what was the outcome of that workshop. And yeah, but I'm remembering, what was the context though that we got even on it?
Well, you had just started posting video on Facebook, live video. And you were very, very authentic and vulnerable in that process. So it was a culmination of things in your videos. You were talking about vulnerability and imposter syndrome while being vulnerable and probably going through the syndrome. Anyways, it created a visceral reaction in me. I was so proud of you, but I also felt every single word that you said. I felt that pain. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I was on video for the first time. Yeah. And I knew all of the emotions and the physical feelings of doing something brand new for the first time. So anyways, that is what made me reach out to you. I mean, I love talking to you. Same thing. I love talking to you in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, reaching out to you about that is really what I wanted to encourage everyone else to try and do. Because here you were trying something that was so foreign to you, and you did a fantastic job. You did an absolutely fantastic job.
And I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because I set out to do videos every Friday, and I got 4 out, no problem at all. And then I really, so the imposter syndrome crept in. And then I had, my husband ended up going into emerge and spending a week in the hospital. And then my daughter got COVID. So I missed a Friday. So I thought, okay, I've missed one. I have a really good reason. And then the second Friday came that I didn't do a post. And well, I still have a good reason. My daughter's sick now, right? Then it just, for me, I think it was, I still could have, regardless of whether my husband was in the hospital or my daughter was sick, I still could have put out a video, because it's not hours and hours of my life for those 4 weeks that I did manage to put out a post. It was, 15, 20 minutes. I would think about what I wanted to say and then fire it off. And I had made myself a promise. I was doing one take. I wasn't going to do it over and over and over again. Whatever it was going to be in the one take. But it did creep in a very serious way of, why am I doing this? I am not qualified to be talking about this. Who am I to be talking about this? Why do I want to talk about this in such a public way? And it really did. It allowed me to take some excuses, some reasons that weren't huge, and they became huge in my mind, to the point where I haven't done the video since the 3rd week of February, and I had made it a commitment that I was going to do them every Friday for the rest of the year. I wanted to look at redefining success, was actually the topic that I wanted to, because I have really struggled with that topic for myself internally. Is, I had very large expectations for myself as a early 20-year-old. And I've had to really kind of unwrap and unpack what I was thinking at that point in my life and where I am now and how drastically different it looks. And so that's what I started out to look at was, that topic of redefining success. But then that whole imposter stuff came in and it really played with my head. And actually the other piece of it why I stopped was I had asked someone for some feedback and it wasn't positive. And I really took, and it was, let me say, it was positioned as constructive and it was absolutely came from a really good place from that person. But I took it so personally, like, and again, the questions kept, well, why am I doing this? I'm not good at it. I'm not, just all sorts of things that then just crept in. So it's interesting that because I've been called out on that just in the last 2 days about, like, why am I not getting back to those? What's my excuse now? What is stopping you? This is something that you wanted to do. And I have to say that it is because negativity and a lack of confidence crept in and I allowed excuses to take over. So,
so it's the research I've done on imposter syndrome, and I want to ask you this question now before it leaves me. Imposter syndrome and receiving constructive feedback. That's kind of two things that are almost battling. We're looking for positive feedback, or we're looking for feedback. And helpful ways that we can improve, but that lends itself to imposter syndrome. And I heard this advice once that if the feedback you're soliciting comes from someone who's a couple steps ahead of you, you can learn from it, right? And you take that feedback and you can learn from it, and imposter syndrome doesn't creep in. So I'm curious to ask if the person who gave you criticism, if they are also showing up live on video.
They do in their professional life, yes, and very much 2 steps ahead of me. But it just, I thought I was really proud of those videos, and I was really engaged with what the comments were afterwards. But the other part of it was I've exhausted what my thinking is, and so then it became not so much, I had ideas about what I wanted to talk about, but it was then I was going to have to start doing some work about, what do I want to talk about this week, kind of thing. And so it was just a combination, but so powerful to know that that's how quickly things can become derailed. What I really want, but yet that whole fear of being found out. And I don't know what found out is, because in my mind it's big, but in reality it's not a real thing. And so, yeah, very, very interesting.
So when you were going through that, what tactics did you use to kind of pull yourself out of it and remind yourself that you are worthy of a place on video, you are worthy of sharing your voice? What did you do to kind of pull yourself out of the imposter syndrome?
Well, I haven't done my magic on that one yet, because I haven't recommitted to the video, but I have gone, this has been a cycle for me for decades. And I know, I actually read a really powerful book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, and it's by Valerie Young. I believe she's PhD. And I know Valerie, actually. I met her in a masterminding group, great lady. And she wrote this book, and it was very much talking about how women experience this, how it differs from men. It does show up in men for sure. And just about some of the solutions. And so one of the things that talking to other people, so just like this, like even just realizing that it's not just me, right? Really, there are so many amazing women and men who have this struggle of not feeling adequate or competent or have enough achievements, that sort of thing, to realize that you're not alone. Now, she did say, and I thought it was brilliant, that you can't share your way out of imposter syndrome. So, you can talk all about it, but you can't share your way out of it. So just talking is not enough. You've got to do some actual physical kinds of things. And so for me, I'm just constantly coming back and just claiming my abilities and my expertise and saying, no, I am good at this. I am extremely good at this.
Yeah.
I'm not so good at this, and why am I beating myself up for not being so good at this, right? Like no one is competent and brilliant in all respects. So why am I beating myself up for not being stellar in one area? And I think that's an important check and balance to realize that, I don't need to be the be all and end all on everything. I have my areas of strengths, and the rest, good enough. It doesn't have to be the perfect. I think there's also just that notion of perfection is that, for me, it's interesting. I've struggled with really wanting to, I don't think I want to come across as perfect, but I want to come across as smart, intelligent, accomplished. And it also relates to me physically. I try to, where I feel I am deficient physically, I try to make up for in other areas. So it does, I really constantly struggle with, there is no one on the planet perfect. Why do I think I need to be? Why do I struggle with that? So, but it's, yeah. How do you handle it? Like, do you struggle with it?
Are you kidding me? It's, and it is rearing its ugly head in this particular season for sure for me.
Yeah.
So it's funny because so my blog post that just went out last week, which is why we're doing tea today, Heather, is about imposter syndrome. And I wrote that blog post about a month ago.
Okay.
And I wrote it before I launched, it was my second launch of my LinkedIn course.
Yep.
So I was feeling okay because I was getting ready to launch my course. I set a small goal. I just set a very relatable, achievable goal because I didn't want to set myself up for failure.
Yeah.
And now fast forward, I've gone through the launch. I fell short of my goal. So I'm in this massive season of imposter syndrome. And now I'm trying to build another course and it's ripping me apart. However, and I wonder if your friend's book talks about this. I'm also going through menopause. And so I was talking to a couple of my friends the other day, and a lot of my imposter syndrome is being compounded by the hormonal changes I'm going through. So when I have imposter syndrome, I am like down. I am so down. I don't even know if I can get any further down. And for the first time in my life, I've had to, and this has happened 3 times over the past 6 months, where I've been so incredibly low that I've had to go, hold on, this is not me. Like, I am a positive person. I bounce back from, I love failure. Even my launch, when it failed, it was like, okay, that sucked, but here are the things that I can fix for next time. But then I fall into these depressions and imposter syndrome. It attacks me so hard when I'm down there. That it's been sometimes like days before I can pull myself out. In the fall, it was about 10 days. This past season, it was about 3 days where like there was nothing good about me, and you've been there. We've all been there. I know I'm not alone, but there was nothing. I have zero skill. I have zero talent. No one is going to hire me ever. Like, those are the thoughts that invaded me. And when I figure it out, other than the hormonal imbalances, I'll let you know. My blog post, I took a different, I guess, angle on the blog post. Is I outlined it with things that we actually say to ourselves. And one of the quotes that is in the post is about, I don't feel like anyone's going to care about my story. And I know the truth is, you're right, probably not everyone is going to care about my story, but my story might help one person, and that's reason enough to share the story. So I think people who are suffering from imposter syndrome to your point, they have to be perfect and they have to please everyone and they have to be everything to all people. But if you're just somebody's inspiration for the day for one person, that's enough. That's your service. And so I'm really trying to come back to that no matter how clumsily I go through things, even these live videos, I'm terrible at video, but I keep doing it because I know at least one person will get something of value out of that will help them with their day, their career, their journey, whatever it is that they're on. That's a hard thing to remember when you step up to the microphone like you do on Fridays. You know, you have those thoughts. Well, who's going to listen to this? Who's going to care? Trust me, I care. I care so deeply about what you say in your videos. Ironically, because I'm also redefining success in my life after 25, 30 years. You and I are like, we're on such similar but divergent paths. Like our paths are actually leading away from one another because we're both in the same industry, but now we're both kind of going this way. But yet we're so parallel in how we're approaching the next season of our life. It's quite fascinating.
Well, and I think a lot of people in our industry, which is the meetings and events industry, we're drawn to because we are a certain personality type, right? I think we are the orchestrators of so much, and the creatives and the brilliant minds behind events. And, you don't get to create these experiences and magic if you have a laissez-faire kind of attitude, right? We are a certain level and personality type, that we are the type A's, we are the overachievers, we are the dreamers, we are the visionaries that pull this stuff together. And, we don't aim for good enough in our professional life. For events, it needs to be as close to perfection as you can get. And that lends itself to, I think, to people that are drawn to our industry. And so it's interesting you say that. I mean, we are going, like you're going into the marketing and branding, and I don't know where quite I'm going. I hope to stay in the industry, but I am actively working on a plan B if there isn't the capacity for me to stay. But and I think that's also part of this, overachiever kind of thing that, I grasped the concept of going back to school full time at my lowest point. Was it the smartest decision? Maybe, maybe not, right? But it was made in a Hail Mary, like, oh, I've got to get out of this, instead of just being able to sit there and be content with that. It was, well, what can I do? What can I do? What can I fix? How do I get out of this kind of low point? So, I think, it's, I think we're also very much women that like to achieve and like to be of service, and constantly doing is part of that. So, but yeah, I think imposter syndrome for me, I'll share with you the methodology that this gal shared, which has been very powerful for me. She related it to imposter syndrome. Kind of shows up as that person that kind of always was your nag, right? Like someone that was just, you hear it in a certain voice in your head. So for some people, it might be their mother. For some people, it might be their spouse. For some people, it might be a boss that they had that was just, a dreadful fit. And it shows up as this voice. And what she suggested that we do is to name it and give it a different voice in your head, so that you're not associating those feelings with someone that is real, that has had an impact on your life in some way. And so she said to, look at a character or create an avatar and give it a name, that, like, no, knock it off, like so-and-so, this is not real. Whereas it's very difficult. So let's use your mother, for example. If it was mom that was, kind of the one that was, you just didn't meet expectations, or you didn't live up to potential, or, whatever the case might be. If it's mom that you hear in your back of your mind, then if you rename it, that's a much easier thing to say, okay, no, this is not true. What I am thinking, what I am feel like I'm inadequate for, what I feel like I am, I don't measure up, where I feel like I, fall short. That's not real. Those are just, ideas that are in your head that you need to get rid of. So I named mine, actually, I wasn't very creative because the instructor used the example of Ursula from The Little Mermaid. And I mean, if you can picture Ursula, she's like this large, is it octopus? I don't know what she is, but you can see the bright red lipstick. You can see the spiky kind of blondish gray hair. You can see the kind of the chubby, and I'm like, oh my God. And it was, the image she gave was that she chose Ursula because those long 8 legs kind of wrapped itself around her and kind of took hold of her, right? And not in a good way, that it really just kind of gets a hold of you and doesn't want to let you go unless you are physically doing something to release it. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to look any further. I can identify with Ursula. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you, I have Ursula that shows up, and I have her printed out, and it's right up above my screen, because every time I try to go down that path, I think, no, hold on. I am good enough. I do know my stuff. I do know where I'm strong, and I'm learning where I'm weak, and it's okay to say I'm weak in some area. And so I call her my inner critic. And when I start to feel it's like, no, Ursula, this is not true. This is not true. I can do this. So anyways, I thought it was just, I was meant to take that workshop that morning. It was like an 8 a.m. workshop. And I thought, but it was so powerful for me to just start to rename it and to say, no, that doesn't need to take over. It'll probably always be there for me. I agree with Valerie. This is, you can't really talk it out. You can't share it out, but you can learn to identify it and then mitigate it. So, but anyways, it's kind of an interesting, very visual. And I am like, when I see something, I know it, right? And I'm not I don't see things in my mind. I need to see things physically. And so for me, it's just right up on the wall. And I look at it and go, okay, yeah, it's not me. So.
You showed me Ursula before, and you're right. I think I was getting so hung up because I was going to find my Ursula.
Yeah.
But Ursula's so perfect. I don't think I'm going to be able to find another Ursula. So I'm just going to take Ursula as well, so that I can move on to the next step and actually now talk to Ursula rather than talking to the nameless, faceless thing that's sitting out there. You said something interesting, that it has to be visual, and I think that's what I need to do as well, because when I'm down, there's nothing that's going to pull me out of it. But if I had a visual and I could identify in that moment that this isn't of me, this is the imposter syndrome setting in, maybe I can find myself rebounding a little bit quicker with those visual cues. I found myself leaning on my vision board during a I found myself leaning on my vision board a lot. And it did help. It was a very temporary fix, almost like people who just need to smoke a cigarette. So like I revisit my vision board like 10 times a day, because I would get a little bit of energy to maybe, okay, move forward. And then I'd fall back into it again. And so I'd have to spend more time on my vision board. So, but I love the Ursula image. So I'm going to incorporate Ursula with my vision board and see if that helps. So I'd like to revisit when you got that criticism, or you got that negative comments, because, and we both have kids. And so I'm going somewhere with this. We both have kids in a world where people are posting things online and posting negative things online. You can call them trolls, you can call them whatever you want. But what advice would you have, not only, I guess, for your kids who might be facing that online criticism, but for people like me who, like yourself, you get maybe 10, 15, 20, 100 positive comments, but it's that one negative thought, just one. It's all it takes. And you fixate on it. You sleep, like you dream about it, you wake up thinking about it. It's all you do. I need advice. How do I get myself focusing back on the positive comments that have come in?
I don't know how you do it. But I do know I can completely and utterly relate. So as you know, so in the events industry, I speak about contracts, right? So the least sexiest, area of expertise to have in our industry. However, I'm very passionate about it, and I love to speak. I absolutely feel no more alive anywhere else in the world than when I'm on a stage, and I love that, and I want that. But I completely agree with you that when the feedback comes in, I can look at all of the positive, but I am like a laser to the negative, and it is the negative that I dwell on over and over again. And I constantly think, well, what could I have done differently, or why did they feel that way and everybody else didn't? Like, I don't say, well, they're the outlier. I look at them and then say, okay, well, are all the rest of them lying? Right? I don't look at it as the proof in the pudding is in all of the positive, and the negative must be the outlier, right? And I don't know. I reached out many, many times when I first started speaking, and to coaches and mentors, people that speak for a living, and they'd say, you just have to learn to disregard them. You can read them and let them go. Like, you just have to it's like, well, okay, that's easier said than done. It must be a learned skill, because I actually think I find myself purposely looking for those negative. Oh, well, okay, yeah, it validates that I wasn't as good as I had hoped to be. I didn't deliver, and that's a bad spot to be, because I think there are a lot of people that are gifted with, they see the positive, and that's where they live. They don't dwell on that negativity. And I don't have an answer, Leanne, other than maybe it is a matter of just becoming. It's interesting, because I've spoken now, I think 2015, 16 was one of the first time I spoke. It'd be interesting to know now if a negative comment came in, it'd be interesting for me to just sit back and see if I actually really do dwell on it as long as I used to, right? I think I still do. I still will, and I still do, but I don't think it affects me as much or for as long. And because I think I also have a list of things where, so for me, I have a friend that reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be kind of accountability mastermind. Well, I think of her as like an amazing guru in our industry. I think of her as just, way up, and as just on a pedestal. I've put her up there. And it took me a long time to really feel worthy of being accountable masterminding with her. And she brought the idea up a couple of times, and I would just kind of slough it off and say, oh yeah, that'd be great. But it wasn't until she actually made the deliberate effort to reach out and explain to me why she wanted to do this, that I kind of sat back and went, oh wow, you see that in me? I think of her as way, way up here, and I'm not worthy. And yet she sees me completely different. And so, yeah, I think when there's examples like that, like being in masterminds where you realize that other people are struggling with the same thing, but you're on the same par as them, when you hold your own ground, I think that's, but it shows up in a lot of places for me. I'm working on a set of contract reviews for a client right now, and it's a planner that intimidates me. I'm just going to put it out there. And can I tell you that I am trying to overachieve. Yeah. Like I don't in a lot of other cases to impress. And I think, okay, Heather, get your head around this. That planner came to me seeking what I know. Yeah. Why am I so damn worried about impressing that planner? Because I'm constantly questioning what I do, what I know, how good I am at it, right? So yeah, it's an interesting beast.
It isn't it though? Like, and we have story after story after story about how it presents itself. You know, your mastermind, it presented itself there. And then this meeting planner, it presented itself there. Like, that's just in the past 2 or 3 months, and it keeps showing up again and again. But to your point, and you said this at the beginning of the show, you know what your strengths are and where you and what you're really, really good at. And those are the things you're really, really good at. Like, can you imagine, like, if it was a skill that you were still working on, and the feelings of doubt that we would have? It would just, like, it would derail you for days and weeks. So I'm hoping that you're coming out of it, especially as you do these contracts and as you connect in this mastermind.
Well, I think we still do, right? Like, it hasn't stopped me. It's just that I need to constantly have this conversation with myself that, you know, because it is stuff that I love, and I as soon as I'm done one, I want to start the next one, but it's still just that internal dialogue where I have to just say, no, I know it, and I can put it out there, and this is good enough. And I think the sad thing would be is if I shut down because of it. If I stop doing it, right? I think it's okay to deal with the thoughts, but when they take over and you stop, then that's when it's won. To me, I haven't stopped, and I don't intend to. It just makes it a little bit more of a struggle to do. For me, I don't know about you, but for me, I think the way it shows up the greatest is through procrastination. I truly struggle with procrastination. I had someone say, well, when you say it that way, you're invoking procrastination. It's like, no, I think the procrastination in me is very much from, I want to put off not feeling inadequate or smart enough or whatever. I want to put it off till, I possibly can't put it off any longer. And then something becomes good enough, right? So it's that I don't want to do it because if I was to start a project early, I would be so worried about perfection that if I just put it off, then if it comes to the 11th hour and it has to be done, it's done. I'm pretty much always proud of what I do, but it's good enough, right? It doesn't have to be perfect because it's just got to get done. So I find that procrastination for me is the way it shows up the most consistently, is that I just put stuff off.
So I'm not in a season of procrastination being my biggest enemy. I've been there in the past for sure. I'm in a different kind of season with a different kind of challenge, I think, for my own imposter syndrome episodes. But you said something super interesting that I think everyone needs to hear. We need to hear it on a daily basis, is when we're creating something, it never has to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough, or we would never ship the work. And there's a book about shipping creative work that I just finished a few months ago. Seth Godin's book is called The Practice. He's a marketing guy, of course, so I gobble up all his stuff. And he talks a lot about procrastination and imposter syndrome holding us back from shipping the work. And perfectionism from shipping our work. But that's, again, what sets people like you and I maybe apart from someone whose stone cold fear will never ship a piece of work, because it has to be perfect. It has to be this, it has to be that. My best friend is actually like that. We have this discussion all the time because she's a perfectionist. And when I say to her, done is better than perfect, she's like, there's no way that is right. So we have this interesting debate about done and being perfect, because I think it presents itself and holds people back from shipping their creative work. And that's imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
What the story we're telling us then is, you aren't good enough. You need to be perfect in order for this to resonate with anybody. So unless it's perfect, don't even bother. That's their narrative we're telling ourselves. And that's paralyzing. There's people who, you know, so much value in what they have to share, and they're just holding it back because it's just too scary to put it out there. So, and that's what imposter syndrome does to us.
Yeah, creative is so subjective too. If you're in that creative field, it's so subjective. What is, you know, perfection to you may be, you know, dastardly to another person, but yet, you know, if it's science, if it's math, if it's, you know, grammar, whatever it might be, there is right and wrong with those. Whereas creative is very much your own kind of interpretation of something, and I can see where that would be very intimidating, to put yourself out there, to show a side of yourself that is open for interpretation, that is not a black and white kind of, we know it to be right or we know it to be wrong. Wow, that's what does that person do for income? Hopefully it's not her job that is her creative.
Well, but it is interesting because those types of people are very happy in their roles at an organization. They're not entrepreneurs, but they're at an organization where there's a paycheck and there's certain hours that they have to meet and certain criteria laid out by their boss, but there's no room in their role for themselves. They've carved out zero room in their role to try something new. So meeting planners are not in that boat, especially this past year, as they jump from one virtual platform to another, to another, to another. They're constantly creating, they're constantly learning, they're constantly trying new things. They're putting it out there, they're seeing what sticks, they're changing it up for the next time. Like, those are people that are continually having to fight imposter syndrome to get to the point where I'm launching this virtual event and I'm using this platform that I've never used before, but we're going to do it anyway. And I love those people, but there are a lot of people in our industry who don't have that creative freedom. And so they're kind of stuck. And AV people, again, I think are not in that. These are the people that, so let's take this, for example. I used to use Zoom for my lives and didn't like the experience. It was just a bit clunky. Couldn't really get comments back. And so now I'm trying StreamYard. Well, the first time I tried StreamYard, it was terrible. Like I was like, am I live? Am I live? Am I live? And it was like, it was I even still kind of do that. I was wondering if we were live today, but now that I've tried it, and like, it wasn't perfect, but now it's a better user experience. But there's a lot of people who won't get off of Zoom. There's no purpose, nothing more to learn here. So we're just going to keep using Zoom. And I think that's holding them back from exploring all the other technologies that are out there. That's just one very small example of fear and imposter syndrome holding us back from creating something new or exploring something new or adding a new skill, right? And you've been doing that all year long. Like, all you're doing is adding new skills and compounding on your strengths. And that's why it saddens me to hear that imposter syndrome holds you back, because you were such a role model for people who want to step out of their comfort zone and try something new, and it's just fear holding them back. And I hope they hear your story and see, okay, yeah, you know what? Heather's struggling with imposter syndrome, but she still went ahead and did it. She's still like in
full-time school at 56. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like, what the heck am I thinking? But yeah, I think if the first step is the worst step, or maybe the first step is sometimes the best step. I don't know which way you want to look at it. It's probably the best step if it, when you go on. It's the worst step because it's the hardest one to take. But for me, like, part of the evolution was, I don't want to sit still. I don't do well, just kind of not having. I think we're drawn to this industry if we love pressure, if we love a high threshold for work, if we, want to be firing on all cylinders, all of that kind of thing. And the longer that we got into 2020, the more I found myself just literally just kind of going, what am I doing? I can't keep going. I can't imagine another month of just nothing compelling in my day. And so for me, it was probably, in truth, a knee-jerk reaction to an incident I had happen. But yet it's been a perfect thing because I am again firing on all cylinders. I am using my brain. My, business is starting to come back and I love being busy. So in hindsight, it was, was a really, really good step. And it just keeps growing. Like my brain keeps growing so yeah, I think it's been a bold move. I'm the oldest in the class, but I also look at it and I it's interesting because some of them are 18, so it's a college program. So some of them have come straight out of high school, and I look and I go, oh wow, that's just not going to be relevant in life, dear. Right. And so, part of me says, going back, you just have a completely different perspective when you've been through seasons of life and you think, okay, really, this is so petty, so small. And yet this gal's entitled to it because that's the stage at which they're at. You just have a different lens and, I let stuff go that some of them dwell on. And I'm sure I kind of fester about things that they think are irrelevant too. So who knows, but it's been an interesting thing.
But to your point, going back to school at this season of your life, you're so much ahead of the game because you've had that life experience. And that's what someone had to remind me of the other day. Because I'm at a certain age now and I'm trying to start a new career. And so when imposter syndrome strikes, a lot, the talking head is that you're way too old to do this, especially in an industry that's dominated by millennials right now. Branding and marketing is not where a 48-year-old gray-haired woman should be hanging her hat. So that's ageism is really what tackles me. But at the same point, the lens I have about how to create a personal brand after doing it for 20 years in my former career or my secondary career, my lens on what works, what doesn't work, what things you should keep testing is different from the 25-year-old Instagram influencer, right? Like completely different lens. I'm talking to a completely different audience, but I have to remind myself every day that 25-year-old Instagram influencer, she's not my competition. She is not someone who's competing for the same audience. She's got a completely different audience with her material. And with you, it's the same thing. The types of jobs and the types of industry appointments that you'll get after this are going to be different than that 18-year-old who's in the class beside you.
Yeah, that's very true, Leanne. And I think probably your life, like you can do the learning, but they can't do the living. Like you can make, right? Like they can't make up for 30 years of living yet. They will, but right now they can't fake the living experience that you bring to it. You are all getting the same education or the same, training or whatever, but you can't replace the life experience. And I think that's, and I see that play out in school and even just, the wisdom to be able to pull back or think about things and, sort out what's valid and what's, just the chafe. There's all those sorts of things that come with being older.
Well, and I find that presents itself with books. Nonfiction books, at least for me, is there's a few titles that I have reread, and different things in the books have spoken to me in the different seasons of reading them. And I'm finding that right now I'm rereading, or I just finished rereading Rework. It's Jason Fried and someone else. They have a website, 37 something, doesn't matter. But it's very much about marketing a new business, very much about the entrepreneurial journey. And when I read it 3 years ago, I was still in my role, my role at Conference Direct. And I pulled different things out of it based on where I was at that time. That's what it was, is I was in between going from Helms Briscoe to Conference Direct and reading that book about entrepreneurship. And now, 2.5 years later, it's about this new journey, and just different things are speaking to me in that book. And so that's kind of that life experience, or that season of life that we're in, that different things are gonna speak to us and resonate with us. I would like to talk, if you have time, about the video series itself and redefining success. Because I'm in a space in my life where, with this massive pivot of mine, I feel I have to redefine success, like from top to bottom. And I'm struggling with it, Heather. I'm not going to lie. I'm really struggling with my worth. Because for the past 20 years, it's been all about my job, all about growing my business. And I had a great business. And then when COVID hit, not only did the business disappear, but I spent more time with my family and more time in my garden, and really started to enjoy those things. And so this whole perfect storm of how I redefine success has been top of mind, because prior to COVID, my success meter was solely work. It had nothing to do with my family, my home, nothing. And now it's, my meter's on the opposite end, and I'm trying to find that happy medium. And so I would love to know where you are at today with that whole redefining success, and your questions and your challenges.
That is such a loaded question, because it really is. And it's so last year was really, I was in a speaking program and speaking coaching program, and I really did a lot of soul searching. I'm trying to figure out what, I think I've always felt that I could actually, you know what, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it publicly. I wrote in a book, I was in a high-level mastermind group with 3 gentlemen in the States, and they're all well-known people. And I wrote in the book one day in one of the sessions that my greatest fear is dying with greatness inside of me. Now, that sounds arrogant as all get out. When I look at it, I am so afraid of dying with not fulfilling everything that I could be. I have had a feeling since as long as I can remember that I was meant to do something great. And part of me I thought it was going to be get out of university, get out of grad school, and I was going to go straight up the corporate ladder to the CEO office. And honestly, I didn't even get a year and a half in a corporate environment, but then we moved. And so it's just circumstances, no blame anywhere, but we moved out of Toronto into London. I went back and forth for a year. I took the train down on a Tuesday, came home on a Thursday. It was ruining our marriage. And so I made the decision and quit. And life never felt, I don't even know what the word is, but I never felt like I never got to a CEO. I never got to where I thought I was going to be. And for years, and I'm going to say decades, I felt like I hadn't measured up to my potential. And so it's taken a long time, a lot of work for me to realize that my little planning company that I started as a default, I was an accidental planner. Staying at home with 2 kids and raising them, and, taking the good and the bad of that, right? Yeah. We often tease that we've saved for their therapy, not for their education, right? I did whatever was needed to contribute, but I never felt like I lived up to the potential of who I thought I could be professionally. And it wasn't until actually my husband got really kind of angry with me and said, you've raised 2 kids that are very successful and great human beings. Yes. You have had employees for years that you helped pay their mortgages, that allowed them to have the lifestyle that they wanted for their families. You have contributed professionally to the lives of 30,000 people based on the number of name tags. Like, I always saw it as, well, I make name badges for a living. And he said, no, you've contributed to the professional development of those 30,000 people that we made name badges for. You know, like, I just always saw the shortcoming side of it rather than what it really meant to the people on the other side of it. And it's taken me a long time to realize and take ownership and claim, yeah, you know what? I did do amazing things. It just wasn't the path that I thought I would take, where I saw myself. And so for me, I get success in a dictionary or is defined as wealth and favor and eminence. And so I've focused on the wealth. And I think, oh, you know, I've never had a big business. Well, no, but I put my kids through school. They both have post-secondary education because of the business that I had. I paid employees salaries. I was able to go out one day and buy a kick-ass motorcycle for my husband, you know, like, it just because of the work that I'd done. And it wasn't just about the paycheck or the bottom line of my business. And I just felt less than for many, 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 many years, that it wasn't measuring up. And so for me, this whole concept of success, I think I needed to do the work to say, I didn't have the success that I thought I would have in my 20s, but I need to let go of that crap, because I do have success. I am successful, and I will continue to be successful because it's on the terms that are meaningful for me, my marriage, my family, and those that I love. It doesn't have to be by anyone else's standards. And so that is the premise by which I was starting to unpack why have I felt so like I have so many shortcomings, when really when I look at what I have done, that those are great things. And you don't have to do a lot. If that's what you're content with, then that should be success. It's not what your neighbor does. It's not what your colleague does. It's if you go to bed at night feeling good about what you've done, you know, that should be enough. And I just felt into the trap of not feeling like I measured up, and that I've been able to shift around. So.
Well, please, I cannot wait for you to get posting again on live video.
Well, okay, you were meant to be today, because I just actually had that discussion saying, you know, with the speaking program, I was kind of like, oh, you know, I have so much on my plate, and I again was giving myself the excuse. So you've inspired me, Leanne, because it's like, okay, no, I do need to keep, because it brought me joy. It brought me, and I want to be able to shed light on, maybe somebody else won't take 30 years to get to the position that what I'm doing, I'm successful at, or it's enough for me, or, you know, it's maybe not where I want to be, but I can learn to be content where I am because I am going somewhere else. So you've done me a huge favor today.
Well, and I'll give you the piece of advice I heard once about creating content, because it sounds like that was holding you back.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk about. Remember that repetition is the mother of all skill. So leaning back on the content you've already created or the message you've already delivered, we still need to hear it 9 times before it actually makes a fingerprint on our lives. So don't be afraid to repeat stories, and don't be afraid to repurpose messages that you already have, because we never got it the first time, sadly, in the same way that you were still working on imposter syndrome 25 years later. It's a process. And so you are now part of that process for me in redefining success. And I'm excited to hear your next message. So I cannot thank you enough. I made notes while we were doing this, so many what I call truth bombs. This is an episode that people need to hear. You are such an inspiration to me. You are such a light. Your vulnerability is inspiring. And I know you are going to impact so many people with the work that you do, because you definitely impact me. And you are welcome to have tea with me any week. You just name it, any week. You want to do more video? You just let me know. Let's get her done.
You're just, you and I met late in the industry. I wish I'd met you 10 years ago, because when we actually did physically just sit down and have a conversation, it really clicked. So I hold you in such high esteem, and it's been a privilege. I hope, when you said about the vulnerable, I've learned, I think, when you have a certain amount of experience in your life, and if there's trauma involved, I think we learn to be vulnerable, because that's where the healing is. And I think if I can continue to be vulnerable and say the hard things, that in itself helps me as much as it might help someone else. So thanks for the opportunity to be vulnerable and to share, and to, let's just book a tea time in 6 months from now.
I agree. Hey, listen,
thank you.
To the point, we could probably revisit this topic in 6 months, and it would be a brand new episode with brand new tips, things that we've learned over the past 6 months. So maybe that's what we do. And we just keep this conversation going, because you and I are not alone. And a lot of people need this message. They need this inspiration, and they need to know that they are enough as well. So thank you, my dear friend. I adore you. Yes, you too. I adore you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Tuesday Tea. In the show notes, I'm going to put some of the resources that Heather mentioned, so you can find that in the links.
Put yours below, too, because I want to find yours too. You mentioned several books.
Yes, awesome. I will. I'm going to write it down right now. Rework and the practice. Write down now. All right. Thanks for everybody. Thanks everyone for watching. Heather, thank you again. I will be in touch very soon. Love you lots. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.